I myself am quite hard of hearing, and when I'm in the back of the church and there isn't a mic, it's a challenge, I know, and some of you might be as well, so I want to be respectful of that. My hat today is going to be a little bit of occupational therapy, but also a lot of physical therapy, because Scott is not able to be here today, and we were talking and feeling like some of the changes that happen when you go from standing and walking to using a wheelchair more often. That's a tough transition for some people and some families, and so we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the equipment and some of the things that are useful. What most of you know, and this is a friendly audience, of course, is that my true passion is function, is occupational therapy, is being able to solve those problems, to keep you as independent as possible, to be able to do what we need to do to get through the day. So that is definitely my passion, and everybody I think in here knows that you can contact me at any point. And if you need my contact information, we can find you after I have cards in my purse, in case you don't already have my information. And so I wanted to do a little less of the gadgets and gizmos and a little more of some of the big stuff today, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'll probably use Mike or Lucas or somebody as a model today so that I can do the Hoyer lift and whatnot. But I wanted to talk first about hospital beds. Sort of, what is the right time? Is there ever a right time? Do you want one? Do you not want one? How does that work, and why would you want one? A lot of people think that a hospital bed is going to help dramatically with rolling, with moving, with getting in and out of the bed. For some people it helps for a while, some people not so much, because the mattress is quite honestly pretty crappy. They're just it's a rental to purchase, so it's something that the insurance generally pays for 13 months, and then it's yours. So what a lot of people find is that they thought the hospital bed was going to be great, and then the mattress is uncomfortable and they can't sleep on it. So for some people who want to not only stay sleeping with their partner, but want to have a more comfortable mattress that they're used to, there's actually a product called a mattress genie. And it's an air bladder and a pump. And the air bladder stuffs under between the mattress and the box springs up to the head of the bed. And you press go on the pump, and it pumps air into that air bladder and pushes the head of the bed up a little bit, because that's sometimes what people need the hospital bed for, is that head moving of the bed. They need it for breathing, they need it for swallowing, that sort of thing, maybe for getting in and out of the bed a little bit more easily. But Mattress Genie is made for all different size beds, and it actually is maybe $100, but it works really, really nicely. So that can sometimes keep you out of a hospital bed for longer. Some people need the foot of the bed up for helping with swelling in their feet and that sort of thing, where the Mattress Genie is only going to lift the head of the bed. But it's potentially an option. If you need the rails to help with rolling of the hospital bed, they make small rails that fit between the mattress and the box springs. It comes up vertically so you can grab onto, that will go onto any bed. So those are available. Sometimes as loaners from the loaner closet if we have them. If not, they're relatively inexpensive, usually under $100. You can get some sort of bed rail, bed cane kind of idea to help you roll. I also just developed a piece of cotton webbing that you can buy by the yard at the fabric store. And what I ended up doing was taking a regular bed, my bed at home. I tied it to one side rail, brought it up across the mattress down to the other side rail. So it was on the sheet, on top of everything. It was very taut and very tight. So what that allowed the person who I made it for to do was, when they were laying down, to slide their hand under that taut piece of cotton webbing to just get a little oomph for rolling over. Because sometimes you're kind of on the sheets and you're trying to grab the edge of the bed and the mattress is moving around. And that cotton webbing was $1 something a yard. So it's very, very inexpensive. And it's just a cheap and easy option for getting a little oomph for rolling. And I can give you more ideas about how to make that if you need it. I've been a king size one, it wouldn't really matter what you did. But sometimes just things like that. Some people off the headboards will make loops and hooks and things to grab and that sort of thing to keep you rolling a little bit longer. There are some products that can help the caregiver to roll the person that are made with, basically it's a big circular piece of fabric with shiny, slippery on the inside and a little bit more sticky on the outside. And so what it does is it, as you're pulling it, those two pieces of fabric roll across each other instead of having to just pull on the person's leg or on their shoulder, try to yank them across the bed. There are products like that that help with the rolling. There are some even draw sheets that are made with handles that are soft, comfortable. Some of them have satin on the bottom so you can slide the person, and then sort of a incontinence kind of topper on the top, so they're comfortable and soft and easy to use, but they allow you to be able to move and turn the person a little bit better. I wanted to also talk about rolling and getting in and out of bed a little bit with my PT hat on, simply because a lot of people don't realize how our bodies are put together and how you can use body mechanics to help that process a little bit. If I, Mike, can I use you for a second? Sure. Come on up. You just lay down at the head of the, that way. So there's question. Go ahead and lay down for a second. Okay, so if Mike goes and tries to sit up like most people do, and he sits straight up, he's using his core muscles, his abdominal muscles, quite a bit, and then a little bit of his hip flexors. They tend to get pretty weak in people with progressive diseases. So this way of sitting up is just not going to work anymore, okay? Then people are trying to, okay, come on, grab the arms, and they're hauling the person up, and it's a lot of work for both of you. It's pulling on the shoulders. It doesn't feel good to anybody. Go ahead and lay back down if you would. If you can help the person bend their knees up, whether you would do it for them or whether they do it themselves, if they have a bed rail, they can try to hold on. If not, maybe just cross their arms over their chest. If I roll him this way and bring this up arm over here, so he comes on his side a little bit, when I push his legs off the bed, there's a tendon on the side of his leg that's actually kind of short, and it gets tight. So what you can find is as I push his legs off the bed, his upper body comes up, almost whether it wants to or not. So for rolling and moving, if I take his legs and he's in a bed position, and I start pushing them down this way, he's coming up almost with much, much less effort, certainly, and I can kind of push down on his hip and up under his shoulder. I'm protecting his shoulders, I'm protecting his arms. It's a much, much easier way to maneuver and to move than just trying to pull or haul or going from laying flat, kicking the feet off, and then you've got to haul that upper body up. So for those of you that may be a little farther, I rolled on the side, bent the knees, and as I was kicking the feet off, the upper body comes up. Okay? So lay back down one more time. It's so nice to have a little model here. And you're rolling, if you can get the majority of the weight going in the right direction first, you'll have an easier time with rolling. And for most people, most of their weight is around their hips and their pelvis. Most people. So if Mike has weak legs, and he tries to grab onto the side rail and just grab and roll, his upper body might go, but the lower body's not moving. It's not going anywhere. If there's any way that Mike can get his leg up, whether that's with one of those leg lifters, like I've got in my room that has it's a piece of wire that has a circle on the end. You hook your foot and you can drag your leg up. You can do that under the covers. But if I start this leg going this way, see how he's almost rolled before he even tries? And so if he can, even if he's very weak, if he can use a leg lifter and get that leg up and give any kind of push himself to just let that leg fall that direction, it's much, much easier for him to roll himself, or for me as the spouse to wake up a little bit and kind of help with that last bit of the rollover that he started, so I don't have to wake completely up. Hopefully that just makes the rolling a little bit easier. Again, the opposite leg from the direction you're going, if you can get that moving that direction, it makes your hips roll, and sometimes that's easier. We've had some people that have used satin sheets, satin pajamas. You have to be a little bit careful about satin sheets or satin pajamas if you're up on the edge of the bed and not swishing right off onto the floor, because it's very slick. There actually is a company called E-Tack, and I can give you that reference, that makes satin sheets that right on the edge of the sheet, for whatever size sheet you get, is more of a flannel or a regular cotton, so that you've got all this nice satin in the middle for the rolling, for the moving. But when you go to get up on the edge of the bed, there's probably about a half a foot of regular material. so you're not going to go shooting off onto the floor, which is a really lovely idea. They make them for all different sizes of beds to be able to manage that kind of thing. If you'll sit up for me, thank you, you're very helpful. No, you're not doing it, just sit. When you're moving patients that are a little bit weak, if you move from the arms, if I just pull Mike up and pull on his arm, what ends up happening is his weight is down generally, most people's is around their hips. If I pull from the upper body, all I'm doing is straining his shoulders, sometimes hurting his shoulders. If I pull around the ribs, we have a couple patients that are very sore around the ribs, and I think a lot of it is because of transfers, maybe in an improper way. You gotta get where the person's weight is. You also have to think about, if I'm trying to lift Mike straight up and help him transfer, I am lifting, I don't know how much you weigh, but I can't lift it myself. And a lot of people can't. This is why people get back pain, because we're trying to deadlift 100 pounds, 150 pounds, 200 pounds, whatever we're trying to do to lift the person up. Because generally, we stand right in front of them, and like, okay, come on up. And it's sort of like asking Mike to stand up with a big ball in front of him that it doesn't allow him to lean forward. I ask Mike to stand up and just stop about halfway, right about there. Do you see his nose is about a foot in front of his toes? He's got to be able to lean forward to get his own weight on his feet. So if you're doing a transfer and you're standing directly in front of somebody in their way and not allowing them to lean forward, even if they're very weak, they might be able to take some weight on their legs if you just get out of their way just a little bit, okay? So as you're thinking about moving people and getting a hold of them, that's one thing to sort of think about, is how to get them forward. Another thing that's useful is these little gait belts. They just have a click strap usually, and they're adjustable. They're washable, you can take them in the shower, it doesn't matter. Little gait belts that click in. If you have that sort of low and tight around the hips, when you go to help somebody move, you are pulling, let's see if this one fits. We saw that around your back. The click is over there. Ah, perfect. Okay, so if I am trying to pull Mike straight up, this thing is going to ride right up. And before you know it, especially with women, it'll be right under the chest, it'll have slid right up. Because again, the hips are generally the biggest, and then our waist tapers in a little bit, and then we get larger again. So it's inevitable that they're going to ride up if you're pulling straight up and trying to lift somebody. If you are helping somebody to their feet by letting them lean forward and getting out of their way a little bit, you're actually pulling forward on the gait belt. You also have to not be worried about sticking your butt out in the air, and I'm going to stick my butt out for all of you in a pretty sight, but it's what works. So what I want to do is, let's say his knees are very weak. They might buckle a little bit, and I'm worried about that when we stand. I can actually get my knees, either I can squeeze his knees or I can kind of get in front of his knees and kind of be ready. But what the key is not to stand so tall. The key is to get out of his way a little bit so that he can lean forward and I can pull him forward and up. So the weight is going over his own feet. I'm not lifting his full weight. I'm guiding him onto his own feet, okay? Whether the person stands up entirely, whether we just hop over to the wheelchair, whether we do, you can sit again, thank you, whether we do whatever kind of transfer we do, if I can get his weight over his feet, it's going to make life much, much easier. Even if I use a transfer board, and those are meant, it's a piece of wood that you're meant to slide along for the transfer. If you have the person sitting directly on the board, it's a lot of weight to pull over sometimes, and it's hard to get them moving. If you can lean them forward a little bit and slide them along the board, you actually get some weight on their own feet. So that way you're not lifting quite so much. Why I'm telling you some of these things is because sometimes, well, number one, some people don't realize, because how do you know? The second thing is that we're happy to do some education. Mostly Scott would, but I'm happy to help as well. If you're struggling with transfers, or hurting, or pulling arms, or not sure where to grab, or how to use the gait belts, how to roll in bed, we're happy to do that kind of training. Also, we will be happy to order outpatient or home health therapy, where you wouldn't do therapy for 6 months, but you do therapy for a very specific reason, which might be mobility or positioning or transfers or safety or movement. Maybe you see them for 3 or 4 weeks. You do a lot of this stuff, and then they go away. And maybe 6 months later, a year later, you have another change, and you do another short round of therapy. We're happy to set that up as well. So I guess the bottom line is don't struggle, don't worry, let us help you figure out how to be better people movers so everybody stays safe. Because all of us know if the caregiver hurts their back, everybody's in trouble. Okay?
Do you have those gait belts?
We do have those gait belts, yes, and you may grab one or ask us. We do keep them. The clinic was started with some fundraising, and there was kind of a chunk of money that was for loaner equipment, and we are able to get a few of the gait belts and help people use them. As with everything, if you're not using it, bring it back, and but we can certainly help you. There are other gait belts that have handles and kind of even more people mover kind of things, but the simple ones work pretty well. Especially they need to stay low and snug. If you have any kind of belly, it's under the belly. The trick is if it rides up, it's going to pull the peg tube. It's going to annoy all those things that you're doing. So if you can, again, think about not lifting straight up, because it's going to ride right up right over the peg tube if I try to pull straight up. If it's down low and tight, I get down low and we come up together, it's not going anywhere, okay? Because I'm pulling more forward at an angle, okay? Just a couple things to think about. I wanted to show you a couple interesting new things that have just come out on the market. One is a slide board, and usually they're wood and sort of small. This is one that has a little piece that velcros to it. And what it is, it's a round piece of fabric with slick on the inside and not so slick on the outside. So what we would generally do with a slide board is use it to get from the bed to the chair to the toilet to the wherever. The slide board bridges that gap. If standing is difficult, if moving is difficult, the slide board helps to bridge the gap. Some people use it for the vehicle because that's a particularly treacherous transfer. There are nice long ones that can help you bridge that gap. This one in particular has cutouts and has little rubber foam on the back, so it'll go around onto the toilets a little bit better and not slide so much on the porcelain or on the bedside commode kind of idea. But the nice thing about this is your butt sits on it and you slide on the fabric. So we've had some folks that need to use this board for toileting and for showering. But the trick is when you have naked butt on wood, like the standard boards, you're not going anywhere. You are stuck to it. You are just not moving, and everybody's nodding and shaking their head. They know. So what is sort of cool about this is if I can lean Mike to the side, however I need to do that, get this shoved up underneath him, and then slide him over. Again, I'm leaning forward. He's helping me the best that he can, and we're scooting over. He's actually sliding over on the fabric, and see how it totally came with him? It's just a new concept and a really interesting idea, I think. It's made by a company called E-Tech, and then you just pull it right out. It just velcros to the back. So you could use a slide board in the standard way if it's just a regular transfer. But this little slick thing is a really, really cool idea, I think. So it's E-Tech, E-T-A-C. And you can Google them. They have tons of products. They have draw sheets and all sorts of interesting things with handles and loops and ways of moving people. If you'll sit back up in there for 1 sec. They also have, the people have probably seen these kind of pivot discs. And what this is, this one's a squishy one for under your seat, your car seat, your hospital bed. If you need to pivot a little bit, because you sit on there and then you can spin your tush a little bit more easily. What's nice is they make one for the ground as well. So if you're having trouble with the person, let's say you've got them up, go ahead and stand up, and they're here, and then they just can't take those steps. Then they're like half falling in the chair, they're tipping over, they just can't take those steps. What's sort of cool, you can sit again, thanks, is that they make one for under the feet. And you put the under the feet, stand the person up or kind of squat them up, pivot the disc, and they're sitting in the new seat. So there are a lot of different kinds of pivot discs out there, but they generally are a lazy Susan idea. Okay, two things that pivot across each other. A lot of people can't turn in the car seat, and this is a pretty cool idea for getting that tush turned. If you don't have the money for something like this, use a trash bag, use a sheet, use something like that to just give you something to pull on, something to push on, something to help turn and maneuver for getting in and out of the car. They actually show it on the packaging for the hospital beds and other places where you're trying to turn and rotate a little bit, and that can help. Be aware when you're sitting in the hospital bed and you've done that transfer from the wheelchair, you want to not have the wheelchair or the other chair way over here, because if the transfer goes badly, where do you end up? But in the middle on the floor. Okay, you gotta just squash that thing up there, just as close as you can get it, and still have room to move your feet, of course. What I also want to have you think about is, go ahead and sit over here if you move for Mike, and just scoot a little bit back in the chair. Thank you for being so cooperative. If I tried to pivot Mike from right here, let's say we're going from this chair over to the bed, he's got to stand up, pivot, 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 step, 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 and sit. Okay, that's a lot of stepping sometimes for people that have weak legs. If I set him up a little bit differently, the transfers can go a little more easily. And what I mean by that is if I help him slide his butt out a little bit, so come out just a little bit, and I turn him just a little bit that direction, and I put this near foot out just a tiny bit. When I stand him up, boop, we're there. There's no stepping, there's no moving around. You've got to get the butt out a little bit, turn a little bit, and think about which foot would need to come slightly forward. If I go back that way for 1 second and come out into the same direction, if I put that near foot backwards and put the other one out, when I stand up, he's just going to be, his feet are all going to be all twisted. So it's the foot that's out and closest is out just slightly in front of the other one. Okay? Again, we're far away, it's a little hard to tell, but we're happy to show you these things. Because setting up the transfer is 90% preparation and 10% perspiration. Okay? You've got to set it up right so nobody falls, nobody gets hurt. If you have seat elevate, you can use that to get higher than where you're going, make that easier. If you don't have seat elevate, if you can use tilt to your advantage for the transfer. Most of these power chairs have tilt on them. So if I scoot Mike to the edge and I tilt the chair back, the front comes up a little bit. And as long as I'm helping this balance, he's coming up higher and higher and higher as the front of the chair is tipping up as the seat is tilting back. So you can sort of use it like a seat elevator in some ways. He has to be at the front of the seat, and he has to be able to help keep his balance, or you have to keep his balance a little bit, but it helps. So I wanted to sort of just give some of these ideas just to spark that there's maybe some other ways to move people a little bit. I also have a Hoyer lift. Just to, some of you use these all the time, some of you have probably never seen them. And that's the challenge with this audience is that some of you are very experienced and some of you are not. So I'll kind of go to the middle a little bit, but if you can stay right there, right? Okay, so the basic Hoyer lift is a giant people mover. Okay, people ask, why can't this upper bar pivot? This is what I need. I need to roll alongside the tub, and I need this upper bar to scooch over so I can drop the person in the tub. Well, you would tip the thing over. You know, it's just not stable. It has to go right up over the legs to be stable. And these things can lift, 400 to 600 pounds depending on the lift. So it has to be stable. If you've got carpet to roll this across and the person's up in the sling, it's a little bit challenging. So what some people have done is gotten those big plastic mats like secretaries use to roll their seats around on the carpet a little easier. And just kind of put a couple of those together and you can roll a little easier. Most of the ones, this is a rental with most insurances. Again, that rent to own, that 13-month kind of thing. What I encourage people to do at our clinic is to think about getting one of these a little bit earlier than what you need it, because it's easier to play around with it and to laugh about it and get up in the sling and whatnot before you're desperate for it. That's the first thing. The second is it's great for fall recovery. If you're still walking quite a bit but you fall occasionally, this pump will go pretty close to the ground. If there's nobody sitting in it, so it's a little hard, but it actually goes down quite a ways. You can put the sling under somebody on the ground, hook them up, and hoyer them into a chair if they were having falls. So it can be a nice product for a long, long period. The slings that we like to use are called a divided leg sling. Looks like a big U, okay? And there's a head support part on it, so that even if you were very, very weak, you can use this kind of sling. Most companies, because they rent these, have hoyers that have been around since the 1970s. They don't really break down. They're very stable. And so they're renting these same things over and over and over again because people they might have a knee replacement or a hip replacement or something, and they only need them for a short period. So then they come back, they clean them up, and they send them to somebody else. So the challenge is that these slings are a little more expensive for some of the vendors than that standard sling that's like a big rectangle with chains that you have to sit on all the time, that sort of hoyer sling that people mostly think about. This divided leg sling you do not have to sit on all the time, which makes it easier. A lot of vendors don't want to do it, quite honestly, because it costs them more money. So we always write our prescriptions that says, must use divided leg sling with head support, and feel free to insist that this is what Dr. Brooks has asked for, this is what Amber and Scott have asked for, this is on my prescription. Feel free to have them call me and I'll insist, because they're just so much easier. What happens is if you have a big rectangle of sling material that you have to sit on all the time, your cushion is almost worthless because you don't sink down into it. You're sitting on this kind of hammock of sling material that's kind of a meshy sort of idea, and it can be uncomfortable. It doesn't work very well. What's nice about these is I lean Mike forward a little bit, or he leans himself forward. I get this down behind him, and so you could do this in the wheelchair. I'll show you in the bed in a minute. Then all I have to do is slide these edge pieces under his knees, okay, and they come up in the middle. So there's nothing under his butt. You're not sitting at it all the time. This is just simply to lift him. What's nice about the butt being open, you can well imagine for toileting, it's a little bit easier sometimes, depending on the pants and whatnot, to be able to manage. Slightly easier. So I take both side pieces, up under the legs, and then generally, it's okay, just relax, you're fine. Generally, the leg pieces need to cross. That makes it much, much easier. Unless you need to clean for toileting, because if I separate, his legs are going to separate. If I cross them, his legs will be a little bit far closer together, and it makes it a little bit easier to get in and out of the chair. So you may do it however you like.
And more comfortable for us.
Is there seven? Exactly. Spoken from a gentleman who's used it before, so. So with a crisscross, and they can cross anywhere that they need to, okay? So for most people, and if you'll hold that just for a second, my legs. Most of them have legs that will open up to get around the wheelchair. Most of the time you have to close it back down to get through the bathroom door or to get around where you need to. Most of them will go under the hospital bed without too much effort, go around chairs, that sort of thing. If you're using the Hoyer lift, you do not have to have your wheelchair smack against the hospital bed. Put it in the middle of the room. Put it wherever is easiest for you to make that turn and go to the hospital bed, or go to your bed, or go to wherever you need to. You can put it wherever you like because you're on wheels. Okay? So actually, if we can spin your chairs, it'll make it easier. Oh, sorry. So the insurance pays for a manual Hoyer, not a power Hoyer. Some companies will allow you to pay a little extra per month for the power version, where you just hit a button and it goes up and down. Some will not. And I haven't really figured out the rhyme or reason of that. I don't know if they're taking some sort of risk as a company or not, but most of them are manual, and they are a crank. You are not lifting the entire person's weight with the crank. It's not easy, but it is hydraulic, and you're able to use that to help yourself. What you want to be careful of is not cracking the person in the head or the face with the bar. You've probably done that. You're laughing. You've done that a couple times, haven't you? So, our roundabout here is probably not a bad spot. You can raise it up a little bit because we've got plenty of slack. This is actually a 6-point cradle, so you may use any of these hooks that you like. What I like to do, and why I like to get the Hoyer lift so early, is because I'd love for you to play around with all the straps. All the hooks have 3 choices. The strap around the back has 2 choices. There's 6 choices here, and figure out what you like, what you need. Put your cousin or your grandkid or somebody in there and then play with it. This lays them down more, this sits them up more, this is more comfortable, this squishes them too much. And kind of play around with what you need before it's a desperate, urgent situation. Okay? So if we crisscross these leg pieces, generally they'll go around this backside. And then generally the arms go on the inside. Thanks for helping. And then I'm pulling up. Just keep your arms on the inside. There you go. Mike's never done this before. So what is interesting is that depending where I pick the hooks, Mike will be sitting up more or less. And most of the time, you don't have to go up very far. You just need to get their butt clear. It doesn't have to be way up in the air. But be aware that what's clear on the power chair or the other chair may not be clear on the bed. So you may have to kind of fudge around a little bit. But once he's there, I'm going to take the chair with us. Once he's clear, he's stable. I can roll anywhere I want. It's actually not so bad. So if he needed head support, he would need a little bit bigger sling, because obviously this is a little bit shorter on him. But this is the idea. It's really not scary. It's not a big deal. You have a valve down here that you can open the person up and lower them down, and you can control that and close it off, raise them back up, do what I need to do. What's nice for getting in the wheelchairs is there are some straps on the back, allow me to pull to get his butt back a little bit. The trick is if you're one person, how do I undo the valve and pull him back at the same time? It's quite a challenge, okay? So if you have a power chair that you're moving this person with, if you can tilt the power chair, you'll help him, see how he's in a little bit of a tilted position? You'll help him set his butt back in there a little bit more easily than if your seat is sitting up perfectly straight. Because if you're one person, you can't reach both at the same time. You're just not going to. Another thing that I have done is I have actually gotten in here and pushed their knees back so they're sitting back a little bit farther as I lower them down into the seat. And that's a possibility, depending on how balanced they are. Once you get in the seat, if you're not all the way back in your power chair, tilt it back, let gravity be your friend, to scoot that butt back without having to work so hard to have to do that. Once he's where he needs to be, I just lower it down, watching not to crack him in the head. A lot of times I don't lock the brakes of the Hoyer lift. And some of the people I teach in the Cabarrus College are just aghast at that I wouldn't lock the brakes. I never lock the brakes, because what happens is, let's say I'm going to sit him on the bed. Never quite been in this position before, have you been? Okay, so I've got him here. He is very vulnerable for having his head cracked open as I lower him down. Okay? So as I'm going, if I don't move it back, and I'm trying to help him with his balance and all that stuff, it's cracking him right in the head. So I need to move the Hoyer back as I'm lowering it down. Once I touch his bottom down, I actually move the Hoyer a little bit away so he's got some headroom, and I can help him with his balance a little bit at the same time. You can stop it at any point. You don't have to just keep crashing to the ground. Okay? So I can go a little bit. I can stop a little bit. I can move it back away. Once his butt touches down, the weight of him is going to keep that okay, and bringing his feet down. Okay? So you can go a little at a time. There's nothing that says you have to do all of it at once. Once I lower it down enough, I can take off the straps, undo him, and then help him back in the bed. We'll go back into bed the same way that we got out, by getting a hand under the knees and a hand under the shoulder. And let me show you what I mean by that. Let's take this out quick. Assuming you have nice short carpet like this, it works pretty great. Thick carpet, not quite as easy. So from here, All I'm doing is pulling the straps out from under him. And again, you don't have to lift necessarily, I just pull it out. Throw this to the side. I would have tried to end up a little bit closer to the head of the bed, so go ahead and pretend that I lowered the wire down there. Because if you end up in the middle of the bed, you're going to have to scooch up, which is so hard. So if you just drop down, it's almost too far toward the head of the bed, because as you raise the head of the bed up, he's going to slide down anyway. So almost more than you need to. So how I'm going to lay him down is grab a hand here at the shoulder, and if I can, a hand kind of at his ankles, mid-calf kind of direction. And the easiest thing to do is to cross his legs. Okay? So what I'm doing is just put this over the other one. Okay? I'm not going too far, I'm just crossing the leg. And then what I'm doing is I'm doing this. Okay? Professional people mover. Because again, that tendon on the side of the leg is so short that it helps slow him down. And you know, generally what happens is you go to lay down, the person falls back in the bed and sprawls into the middle of the bed, and then you're sunk. You gotta pick those heavy feet up, you have to move them around. And this is just an easier way to do that. And you notice I got kind of low to protect my back. You want to keep that natural curve in your back and bend your knees. Okay? Your thigh muscles, your quads are stronger than your back muscles for most people. So you want to just squat on down, gently lower them with your hand around, and then what we do is once you get them down and under to here, then you can transfer your hand up here, shift the pillows, help them get on their back, you know, whatever you needed to do to be able to get him in the position that you need. Hopefully you'd have some sort of draw sheet, you scooch them around, get them comfortable, that kind of thing. Go ahead and sit up again for a minute. You just sit down. I've got a really new device that's sort of funky. It's not covered by insurance. It's about $1,400, which is a lot of money. However, it's a really cool idea and a really cool design. And what happens is we bring it in close to Mike and put his feet on there. Thank you. We raise and lower this thing as we need to. The strap goes around him, and it's a little bit small, but to sort of show you the idea. With one hand, just don't even help. You can basically pull him up, and then I sort of hook it back in place. And why I can pull him up with one hand is the way the strap on the back pivots. Okay, it's just balanced. So if he can help, of course he can help pull up as much as he can. But it's a people mover that goes to a sitting and standing position. And then once I'm up and locked in place, then I can roll and move where I need to. So maybe you roll from the bed to the toilet and deal with the pants. Now, you have to be able to manage your upper trunk. And now once you get up in that sling, go ahead and lean back a little bit. Let's go lean back as much as you need to. See, his hips are supported, his knees are supported, but if he can't control his upper trunk, this will no longer work for him. But imagine if you're having a little bit of trouble standing and maybe your knees buckle a little bit, maybe you're just starting to have problems with standing, or the spouse can't quite help you with balance while they pull up your pants, while they're wiping, while they're doing whatever they're doing. This is a really interesting idea and a really nice idea. And I tried it on the gentleman who represents this model, who is 6'2", 220 pounds. I pulled him right up. He promised he was not helping one little bit. You were helping a little bit at that time, but it's hard not to, but he was not helping. And I was able to balance it just because it's sort of the counterweight of this device and pushing against his knees. So it's just an interesting thing. We don't have one in the living closet because it's brand new, no one's tried it. But it's an interesting idea. And if you were going to have the demo for a little while, so if anybody wants to play with it, you're certainly welcome to. They have different size slings so that you get the right size for how tall a person is. This is a small one. But it gives you an interesting idea and an interesting thought. Again, by that ETAC company. So. very balanced. It's actually got a lot of wheels underneath, so I can spin, and you don't feel like you're going. I mean, you're really solid.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can lean right back, and you're not going. You can also lean forward. Go ahead, lean forward. So go ahead. He's not going anywhere. Very, very stable. Okay. It's called the Razor. The Razor. Like instead of with a Z, like a razor, it's R-A-I-S-E-R. Like you raise a person up, kind of razor. Interesting idea. And then basically what I'm doing is I'd raise this up just a little bit. You want it in the low back. I'd unhook him. You go ahead and lean back a little bit, just let me know you. See how I can control the area you're ready to land and you can buttons down. And I'm going to be helping. I'm really able to do it with not much force. I'm sorry, that was that close enough, but that's the idea. Okay? And basically it's because you've got this piece that's non-skid against the person, but it slides in between. Interesting idea. There's a lot of new things coming on the market that are out there and really able to help. So thanks Mike for being my demo. You can take your gate bell off if you want. That was awesome, thank you. So what I wanted to do at this point is to take some questions and to be thinking about, it doesn't have to be PT, this is more PT kind of stuff, but it can be about gadgets, it can be about problem solving, things you've come up with that you want to share with other people, things that you're experienced with, how to do the sling, the Hoyer lift, any of that kind of thing. Because we have just a few more minutes left and we're able to talk amongst ourselves. Does anybody have anything?
The lift, is it something that you can roll down a ramp to get the person into a car as well?
The trouble with the car is this boom arm. Because you've got to get the person up enough that you can get them out of the seat and into the car seat. But generally, even with the door open, that at the top edge of the car is cracking into this. It's very difficult to use in the car. We've had occasionally, there's been some trucks that have had enough of an opening that, and what you generally have to do is kind of get up next to the car and sort of do a 1, a 2, and at the 3 you lower them down. It's not pretty. They don't work very well for the car. I think you could probably roll a person on the ramp, but it just doesn't work well for the car. The car is a sticky problem. The slide boards, those pieces of wood, like that white one that can help you go from point A to point B, can help a little bit. Because most people's chairs, the arms raise up, and you can put a third of it under their butt and a third of it on the car seat where you're going, and it's kind of slide them along, even if it's uphill a little bit. It makes it a little bit easier.
I just wanted to make sure that it was safe to go down the ramp. It's like if there were people there, they help go from the lift to the car, but just making sure.
As long as your ramp isn't too steep, I think you could, and you maybe had a couple people, you could certainly do it. Yeah, it'll roll. It's just something you need real brakes that would slow you down a ramp. So if you have a steep one, I'd be very, very careful. But if it's a reasonable 1 in 12 kind of ramp, I think you'd be fine. Because you can slow a person down. They're pretty good handles. You can step back here on the brakes if you needed to. You'd probably have, but most likely, you just take the chair down the ramp anyway, which would be safer. If you're going to have to get out of it into the car anyway, probably the wheelchair of some sort or the roller would be easier and safer. They do make some lifts that instead of having the rolling mount, they make one where this boom arm, this vertical bar right here, actually attaches in, as you open your car door, there's right at that hinge where the car door would be hinged to the vehicle itself. They can actually put a set of pins in there so that this piece sort of drops into that, and then this, instead of being straight, has multiple curves. So you basically lift the person up out of the chair and curve them right around into the car seat. They're pretty expensive, but they work fabulously. And then when you're done, you just lift it out of those pins and put it in the trunk or that kind of thing. There are, everybody knows about the kind of accessible vans that are crazy expensive and that sort of thing. A lot of communities have public transport that people aren't sure about, but it works pretty well. If you have a minivan that is not converted, you can't drive the person in their wheelchair up in the van, but you can carry the wheelchair. You take out that middle row of seats, you get a portable ramp that you just kind of lay down on the edge and drive the chair up into the middle of the van. You still have to move the person out of the car seat, but at least it carries the wheelchair with you. You can do the same with the truck or that sort of thing. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, you brought up a point. What are options for electric wheelchairs? Do you have to have a minivan? Can you have?
Some people will just use a hitch lift off the back of the vehicle. You have to have, in order for these sorts of chairs that run up or heading toward 400 pounds, sometimes more, you have to have a class 3 hitch. And you all can put on hitches and they can tell you what kind of hitch your car can accept. It has to be a little bigger SUV, a little bigger truck, that kind of thing to hold a class 3 hitch. Because the weight of the chair is on the frame of the car, really. And so if you have too heavy a chair, you're lifting the front wheels of the car right off the ground. Okay? So you have to have a class 3 hitch. And then the lift mounts into the hitch. And there's 2 different kinds. There's one that's manual, where just a ramp folds down, you drive the chair on, lock it down and go. There's other ones that have a key, it lowers to the ground, you drive the chair on, it raises back up, you tie it down and you go. The issue with that is you've spent a goodly amount of money on this lift for the back of the vehicle, and you still can't get the person in the car very easily. That becomes more and more of an issue. That transfer becomes more and more of an issue as things go along, and it gets harder to stand and harder to move, and how do you manage that? Some people will spend the money on one of those seats, it's called a tourney seat, I believe, that you press the button and it comes out of the van and down, that kind of thing, transfer them on more easily. But it almost seems to me, if you're going to spend a few $1,000s on a lift and a hitch for the back of the vehicle, and you're going to struggle to get the person in and out, there's some used vans I've seen for $8,000. So, I don't know. Is it worth the money? Is it not? It's a sticky challenge. If you've got plenty of help and we'll be able to get the person in and out of the vehicle no matter when you need to, then I think the hitch is an awesome idea. You still have to deal with the rain issue, and you have to get some sort of grill cover or something to put over it. Or you can have a plain old minivan and transfer the person into the passenger seat and then drive the chair up into the middle of the van, or a truck. But sometimes those transfers are difficult. I often have used vans on my door, and you can always call. There's a website called Disabled Dealer, disabled with a D, Disabled Dealer, 2 D's in the middle, that sells nothing but used vans. And most of them are by just people selling their vans, not dealers, despite being called Disabled Dealer. Most of them are not dealers. And you can sort on there by price or by location. And the location is by state. So sometimes I'll get on there and I'll pull up all the ones in North Carolina or the ones in South Carolina and see what's up for sale, sort of how much things are, what I can get for my money, and then I'll pull them up by price, starting at the ones that are like 5,000, 7,000, 8,000, see what you can get. And sometimes that's a full-size van with a platform lift that the lift drops on the ground, you drive the chair and it raises it up and you drive into the vehicle. They're not so good on gas. It's a trade-off. You spend a little less in the beginning, maybe a little more on gas. It's transporting the person is a challenge. What some people will do is use the power chair around the home, the neighborhood, the garden, the lawn, going anywhere they want to go, and then when they go out to the doctor, they use a manual chair, a transport chair, walker seat, something like that. But that gets uncomfortable. The more you have to sit. I know some of you who haven't been able to bring your chairs, they just sit all day in a comfortable manual chair. It's frustrating. On the clinic day, we often have chairs you can borrow. If you'll let us know if you have to come in a manual chair. For some reason, maybe a van isn't working or you don't have transportation, we can always let you sit in something, a power chair for the day. That's a sticky problem for a lot of people, trying to figure out those transport options. Yes.
Into this demonstration at the office,
Sure.
Because a lot of the things that you demonstrated, he does it because when he's trying to help people get in there, he's grabbing and trying to.
Yeah, it's hard. How do you know what to grab? Yeah.
Take somebody from me and I tell them, please don't,
Okay, sure. And what would be the easiest thing? Sometimes clinic day is a little busy. Since you live in the area, what we could do is just, Scott or I could spend an hour or two and just come on by the clinic and we'll set up an appointment. And have both of you there and we can do some people moving and that's perfectly fine. We're all, besides being clinic therapists, we're all full-time outpatient therapists at the clinic. We see people with all sorts of neurological problems. I see people with spina bifida, cerebral palsy, lots and lots of other things besides just ALS. So I have time, and Scott has time on his schedule to see you privately and do some of these things that we need to do. We can also, of course, help set up home health therapy or an outpatient center that would be closer to you or that sort of thing as well. Even if you just need a couple visits or one visit to deal with some of these problems, that's perfectly fine. Okay? What else?
I
custom fit thing where he can basically take his wheelchair and drive a motorcycle. Is there any kind of a fit to a vehicle where, say, you could drive, the wheelchair up into the van?
And drive.
And then, well, not necessarily drive, but you could just lock it down in that middle row where you wouldn't have to transfer from it to another.
Yes. When you have an accessible vehicle that has either a raised roof or a lower floor, the ramp folds out. The chair and the person drive in. They generally find a parking spot, whether it's a lock that's under the chair or whether it's ratchet straps, and they stay in the chair. They generally don't do that transfer. The challenge is if you have a regular old minivan, if you try to take the person in their chair, you lop off their head. It's just not a big enough opening. So if you don't have an accessible vehicle, you can't get the person to stay in their chair, and that's the problem. So it has to be either a raised roof or a lowered floor. The challenge is those conversions that make them accessible vehicles are like $20,000. Let somebody else pay for the conversion. You buy the van already converted, so that someone else has paid for that, then it depreciates, then you get a better deal. Okay? So don't do one yourself if you can possibly help it. It's just so expensive. It's really not worth it. But when you have any sort of accessibility, they raise roof, lowered floor, kneeling, whatever the van can do, the person stays in their chair. There's something called Easy Lock. That's a V-shaped piece of metal on the floor of the van, and there's a bolt attached to the person's chair. They just drive right into the van, locks in, done. You have an Easy Lock? Yeah, that's great. And it helps a lot. The bolt does stick under the chair a little bit, so sometimes we'll pick up grass and dirt and stuff if you're over too big a chair. Quite as easily.
Some things where both wheels are making contact at the same time. You can't problem.
Right. The bolt does stick down, and it has to stick down, otherwise it won't hit that V-shaped piece of metal. Now some companies are starting to make retractable bolts. They're a little more expensive, but they are there and they're possible. A lot of people just use ratchet straps and tie the person down in their chair, and then as the seatbelt comes that's attached to the van, the shoulder strap comes around and hooks in and keeps them. Not just the seatbelt on the chair is not enough. You have to be tied to the van, because if they just have a waist belt on and you stop at 65 miles an hour to a dead stop because you've gotten in an accident, you're gonna, be impaled. That seatbelt may fail. You've got to have one that's attached to the vehicle in some way, shape, or form. Okay, that's at least what the transportation people are saying. What other ideas or things you can share with other people or questions? Is that great? So I would encourage you to use the clinic, as like Nicole said earlier, to use the clinic staff as resources. All of us are full-time. We are happy to help. If you have a question and you think, I don't even need this yet, I just have a question. I just want to know what's out there. Just call or email or whatever. We're happy to help. Okay? This kind of stuff that needs a prescription, all you need to do is call and say, I think I need a Hoyer. We fell the other night. It was hard to get up. I just want to keep it in the spare room for when we need it. We'll do the Hoyer script. We'll find somebody who can do it. It comes out to the house. If you really hate it, you can send it back. It's a rental. But if it works, then you keep it at the house and you've got it when you need it. It is not the speediest process. I don't know, sometimes the hospital beds take a little while. No airless and stuff, so you're just fighting with that. So don't wait until it's an absolute desperate emergency, because it can take a week or two sometimes to get it out to your house. Okay. Also, the loaner closet does have a few Hoyer lifts, not a lot, but a few. We don't generally keep hospital beds because they're just too big and bulky. We just don't have the storage to be able to keep them. But sometimes I'll find out about people wanting to sell one, or they don't go bad really. They last forever. As long as you get a new mattress, the frame is perfectly fine. There are some that are for people who are taller. They don't come much wider. It's hard to get a double hospital bed. They exist, but you'd have to pay out of pocket. They're pretty expensive. So some people find it easier to, if they have a king-size bed, to get 2 twin beds, put on one of those bed rail things that just slide under the mattress in the box spring, and can get a mattress genie that lifts the head of the bed up. And if you have two twins, then the whole bed isn't raising up. At least one person raises up and the other person gets to lay down, but you can still reach out a hand and touch your partner. You can still be in the same bed as your partner and not have to worry about it so much. And then you're talking more like, you know, $100 for that mattress genie, probably less than $100 for the bed rail, and you can still be together. You don't have to have a hospital bed. Okay?
The newer lift that you had, you said it wasn't covered by insurance?
Which one?
The stand-up?
No, it's not. It's around $1,400. They don't pay for the sit-to-stand kind of lift. This is basically the only kind that Medicare and most insurances will pay for. And while $1,400 is a lot, if it works, you tried it and it works for a long time, it may be worth it.
Well, and I guess that's part of my question was,
Is it how long?
Not approved because it's too new, or?
Yes, they're seeking funding. The codes, the approval codes. And because it's a manual device, it might actually be coded in the same way as this. It's from Sweden. They're working on getting it coded in the US. What else? Any other things? Great, guys, thanks. Thanks for your attention. It looks like lunch is here.